Hello and welcome to another AdvancedSkeleton video. In this video, we're going to take a look at the rigging of the new demo character, Max. And we're going to start out by inspecting the model. And the first thing I'm going to check for is model symmetry. Now the quick way to look if the model is indeed symmetrical is to duplicate the entire model and apply a scale of -1 in X. And any discrepancies between the right and left side will show up quite clearly as doubling up of lines. To illustrate this, I'm just going to move the copy a little bit to the side to show you what this would look like in the case of asymmetry. Now I'll set the translation of this copy back to 0, zoom in on the face, and we can see that indeed this is a symmetrical model. So I'm going to delete the copy. Now the other thing I'm going to do to this model is I'm going to run it through the model cleaning tool. Now the model cleaning tool, it can be found in the pre section of the toolkit. And what this tool does, it goes through all the objects of the model and exports each one of these as a model file in an OBJ object format. Now this object format does not hold any information of construction histories, so this ensures that all such history is completely removed. Note that this step is not required when using AdvancedSkeleton, but rather is just a recommended step for optimizing the model. Then I'll go ahead and save the model. And we'll start on the rig by creating a new scene and reference in the model. Note that referencing in the model is also not a required step for AdvancedSkeleton. It's just a recommended workflow to help keep a clean separation between the model file and the rig file. Then we'll go ahead and import the standard biped fit skeleton template and place this to fit the geometry. Then once we have the fit skeleton matching the geometry, we'll go ahead and build the AdvancedSkeleton. Now when it comes to applying deformation to this character, as the topology here is fairly neat and built with deformation in mind, we'll go ahead and use the deform option for skin loops. That means we're going to go ahead and define the skin loops on the model that corresponds to each of the joints. Then once we have all our skin loops defined, we'll go ahead and select our geometry and hit bind. And we'll quickly test that that has bound correctly. So at this point we got our basic skinning done. Now what we can do, since we use the skin loop options, we can very quickly automatically create the low-res poly layer that we can use for faster playback performance. And what we'll do, we'll just select the geometry and hit create cutups. Alright, now we have a high-res and a low-res version of the geometry. Next, let's have a closer look at doing some improvements to our high-res deformations. As we have a look at this elbow bending, we will see the typical issues that you would get with normal skinning, where we're getting some pinching on the inside of the bend and volume loss on the outside. Now there are many techniques that deals with this, But for this particular character, we're gonna take a look at a function called the curve-based corrective shape deformation. Now, as the name suggests, this is gonna be a corrective blend shapes to help improve on the deformation. Now, what makes this different than the normal standard corrective shapes is that instead of manually sculpting the corrective, we're gonna use some curve-based deformation to automatically compute that corrective shape. Now, here's how that works. First, you select your geometry and define that as your main mesh. Next, we're gonna find the DFK control that is responsible for the deformation area that we're currently correcting. Then we'll go ahead and create the curves. Now, if we go over to the top view, you can see that we have curves that represents the inner and the outer side of the deformation. Next, we'll hit the Create Test Animation button, and that has created a 10 frame long animation that does a 90-degree bend on this area. And we can now already at this point see there is a big difference in the behavior of the skinned mesh that has the pinching and volume loss, and these curves on the inside and the outside of the deformation. Now, there are many parameters that lets us define the behavior of these curves. And these parameters are the slide attributes on these slider joints. Slider joints we're not going to cover here, that's covered in a separate video, and it's an extended feature of the skin cage deformation option. Now we can adjust these slide attributes so that we get the exact profile shape that we would like to see for our elbow as it bends. Then we'll follow the steps, which are hide the original mesh, create a new deformation mesh. Now, this is a mesh generated based upon the deformation curves. And at this point, we have some buttons to quickly toggle between the original and the new deformation mesh, so we are sure that we are getting the improvements that we do want. And once we're happy with the exact way the deformation looks on the bent elbow, we'll go ahead and hit Bake as Corrective. And that is now baked as a corrective shape into the elbow. And we can see the effect by dialing in and out the envelope of the corrective shape deformer. Next, we'll go ahead and apply the same technique to the other major limbs. And once we got that done, we'll just take a look at the result we're getting from some of these curve-based corrective deformations. So once we're happy with the result we've gotten from our body setup, we'll go ahead and move on to the face setup. Now, something to note is that the body setup does include a basic setup for the eyes and the jaw. Now, once we're on the face setup, it's gonna replace both the eye and jaw setup. So if you know you're gonna be running the face setup, there's no point of going through and weighting the jaw in the body setup, because this will be weighted automatically in the face setup. So we'll go ahead and follow the instruction steps. First off is creating the face fit skeleton node, which gives us these two red circles that should be placed and scaled to define the size of the head as per this instructional image. So we'll move the lower red circle so that it lines up just underneath the chin of the character, and then we'll scale until the upper circle just touches the top of the head. This tells the face setup system about the size of the head. Next, we'll define what is our geometry object, and this will be our face object. Where it says all head, it's basically all the geometry involved with the head. So in this case, it's going to be the face geometry itself, the lower teeth, upper teeth, the eyebrows, the eyeballs, and the tongue. Now, if some of these have not been skinned before, it will prompt about this and just create a new skin cluster fully weighted to the head. Now this is our right and left eye, upper teeth, lower teeth, and our tongue. And then we're moving on to the fit section and defining all these edge loops and vertices as per the instruction images. Next, we'll go ahead and build the face setup. And we are here encountering an error during the build. Now this is not very uncommon because there are so many variations in the way face models can be built. Now in situations like this, we're going to go back and run the step builder instead of trying to run the entire face setup in one go. Now first thing I'll do is reopen the scene as I saved it just before running the face build. And this time, instead of running the entire build face setup, we're going to run through the individual steps. Now usually after running step 4, I recommend just moving the controls a bit to make sure that the eyeballs have been set up correctly. Likewise, after step 5, it's good to make sure that all the vertices on the eyelid is selected as per this image. And also at this point you can select the eye controls and make sure that the eyelids are following the eyes. And here we can see where the build process was failing. After running step 7, we should have been left with an object of a cutout forehead. But in this case, we are left with no object. So let's take a closer look what could be causing this. Now in the outliner, we can see that there are 4 curves. Now these 4 curves are providing a guide for the cutout. So the cutting tool will be tracking along the forehead, coming up on the side next to the eye. But at this point around here is where the cut is failing, because this model has the eyelids built as eggshells that are intersecting with the main face skin. So what we'll do to help the tool be able to do the cut is adjust these curves so that the curve run nicely across the skin. So we now have the curves providing a better guide how to cut out this forehead. And we'll simply hit the update button to see if the cutout works. And this time you can see that we have correctly been left with a forehead object. And we'll now continue running through the rest of the steps. Now after running step 12, we can see that the lip fall off area is becoming a bit large on this character since the model is have fairly scarce topology. So right now the deformation of the lip would actually extend out as far as the selection shown here. So we'll go ahead and reduce this to a value of 1 and hit update and continue with the steps. Now, after running the step 25 squint, we can see that the squint comes out a bit unfortunate on this character due to the way his eyelids are built. So what we can do is adjust the points on this lattice to make the squint look a bit better. So now that the face setup is finished building, we'll go ahead and test some of the controls. And the face controller seems to be working alright. We'll be moving on to do the eyeball setup. And here we'll go ahead and define the edge loop that represents the pupil. Now this particular character does not have a iris as such, so what we'll do is just define a edge loop that is a bit larger than the pupil and define this as the iris, and essentially this determines just how large the pupil can get. We'll do the same for the left side. And go ahead and set up eyeball. Next we'll do the eyebrows. By default, the eyebrows are not attached to the geometry, so we can choose our attachment method, and for this character we're gonna use wire deform, as this creates the best curve results. And we can see that will attach the eyebrow to the skin. The eyelashes will skip, as this character has none. Head squash we will go ahead and apply. And we'll quickly step through the blend shape wizard, as that will take us through each of the shapes and we'll make sure they all look decent. And that's it for this video. If you want to try out this character, you can download him from the AdvancedSkeleton website, or you can download him from the demo section using the automatic demo rig downloader tool. That's it for this time. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.